We are back. It is our second hour, last hour of the week. So great that you would join us wherever you are, anywhere in this great country. We hope that you are safe. It looks like it could be a weekend of what they're expecting, certainly, or looking toward is civil unrest because of the release of a police video. Be released later, and you heard Kim mention in her news. I want to talk to Jim Avila about that on Fridays. Jim joins us sometime with Michael Shure, sometimes without. I don't know if Michael, we do have Michael. That's great. I love Michael always. Michael is like the girl I wanted to go out with in high school. You know, she didn't ever really, sometimes she didn't ever let me know for sure she'd be going out with me. But then she sometimes would show up at the last minute, and it made me so beamingly happy. And how about a warm Mark Thompson Show welcome for Jim Avila and Michael Shure? Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Morning.
So Michael, as you know, has forgotten more about politics than most will ever know. Jim, you know, from his many years as a senior correspondent on ABC News and White House correspondent. So it's just great that you guys take a moment to weigh in. And of course, I'll mention also that Michael Shure is a massive Niners fan. So you have the triangle of love between Michael Shure, myself, and Albert on the Niners. Let's get the Niners. Let's get the nine. What's that?
I was going to say for a second, I thought Jim Avila was naked.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
because his shirt looks.
Yeah. I was like, is he topless
I'm
today?
not that color.
That's for his OnlyFans site, not here.
It was wrong. It was stupid, and I'm trying to be a better person.
Yeah, he doesn't want to tube on us quite yet.
Yeah, not tubing.
All right, we'll get to the Niners, I guess, at the end here, Michael Shure. I kind of want to start with what I was talking about. I mean, it's so odd and yet I suppose so appropriate that communities from coast to coast are being told to brace for civil unrest of some kind once this video becomes public. I mean, you see I was saying in the first hour, this public beatdown of this guy. I mean, by these officers, a brutal beating that led to the loss of life. And they're black officers. I was speaking before in the last hour about the institutional nature of this kind of brutality, and you might even be able to argue the institutional nature of racism on the part of law enforcement. And I say this guardedly. I don't think that all law enforcement is like this, but at some point, one has to be recognizing some of these trends within law enforcement that none of them seem to have changed from the last go round. Michael, you first on all of this.
Well, so it's not even a question of, yes, none of it seems to have changed, or a lot has changed because this is one incident. We don't know, right? I mean, it's hard to say that anything's changed. There shouldn't be another incident after you saw George Floyd. I mean, that was enough that you would think, and any kind of intellectual or non-intellectual person should think, well, okay, we can't do that anymore. But we're also not on the front lines, and it takes a while. You know, what we're learning here is that this is as much about race, or it's probably more about race in many considerations, but it's also about policing and the way we police in this country and the way we train police officers, so that when it happens with 5 African-American officers and 1 African-American victim, what do you look at? Well, your gut check is not on race. Your gut check is on, well, how are we policing this way? How is this not being trained out of people? How is it being indoctrinated into people? And I spoke, on the political end, I spoke with a politician from Memphis yesterday who told me that he thinks that Memphis is doing it right. So the aftermath is being handled with a seriousness that we haven't seen immediately. And then you had Benjamin Crump, the attorney for the family of Tyre Nichols today, saying that this was a blueprint for how cities should deal with this should it ever happen. And Memphis is doing a fantastic job. They handed down indictments. They were deliberate. They're releasing the video on time. They were making sure the family was included in everything that was going on. So, I mean, we're learning how to deal with it better. The idea, though, is that why are we still having to deal with this, and why are police not being trained differently?
Given those comments and given, go ahead, Jim. I was going to ask you whether you thought that the same kind of thing that we saw in the aftermath of George Floyd was possible here, given what Michael just said, which is that the family attorney said that under the circumstances, he thinks that the city has responded responsibly.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that the city has learned from other incidents, especially last year. And I really believe that what Michael talked about as far as training is concerned is the real issue, or is one of the two issues. One is race, obviously. Two is training in general, because it's not just white cops who do this; it's African American cops who do this, and Latino cops who do this as well. And I know from my experience of covering law enforcement and going to academies and covering the training and watching what they're doing, the first thing they teach you is to somehow gain control, gain an upper hand. So automatically, especially, cops are taught to exert authority, and they're not taught enough about how to bring the situation down, how to calm the situation. Instead, in fact, what we see too often are police officers instead antagonizing the situation, making it worse, and that's where the training needs to be more effective. This business of always having your hand on your baton, or always having your hand close to your weapon, or always kind of, I was always taught, keep your hands on the wheel, call them sir, be respectful, and you should, okay? But not everybody's like that. And officers do not respond well, and they're not been trained to respond well when somebody is not doing that. And they really have to fix that, because instead what they're trained to do is to assume this position of authority where, where they're almost asking for some kind of confrontation sometimes, and especially some officers who have this issue. And I'm very critical of the way the police are. And while I'm not in favor of abolishing the police, I think that was a bad that was actually a bad phrase, a bad slogan.
Defunding the police was ridiculous.
Or abolishing them or whatever. That was just bad. That was bad branding. But changing the police is in fact necessary, and using more social workers, using more mediation skills is necessary in today's world, and we're not getting.
Let me. This is an odd time to ask this, or to play devil's advocate, or whatever you want to call it, or to just tee up this argument. But let me just follow it through for a second, because I heard a pundit, maybe somewhere yesterday or whatever, say, cops shouldn't have guns when they because this came from a traffic stop, and a lot of these things come from traffic stops. It's always amazing how these traffic stops escalate to this point where somebody ends up dead. But they were making the point, well, you shouldn't have cops with guns involved in traffic stops. And I thought, well, in the old days, I would have said that's true. But now so many people have guns, and every time they pull somebody over, they don't know what they're dealing with. It's hard for me not to be at least sympathetic to a cop having some kind of way to defend him or herself. I guess what I'm saying is there's so much gray area now because so many people are armed, and it appears to be a society that has cranked up violence in ways that do affect law enforcement, domestic violence situations, if they show up and that sort of thing. It just makes the entire process of reforming, which is what you're talking about, Jim Avila, a little bit more difficult. Don't you agree, Michael? I think it's a prickly kind of thing to try to address.
It is, and this is what addressing something looks like in America in 2023, is that people are talking about all sorts of ideas, even defund the police, which was nobody ever proffered it officially, right? It was never came up for a vote. It was no city said it, no city, Minneapolis came the closest by saying we're going to start from scratch, but we're not going to defund. We're actually going to refund to an extent once we figure out how to do this right, because we did something wrong. So this is a work in progress. And one of those conversations is about that. I mean, the extreme to that would be, well, don't pull anybody over, right? Don't arm police officers and don't pull anybody over. Maybe that's safer. But of course, we know that's not the case. But you're even hearing people say the extremes, and generally speaking, people meet in the middle. One thing, though, that we have to be very careful of, I think, during this episode, and this video I have not seen, but everyone I know who has seen it said it is as brutal as anything they have seen. So they're telling people to watch it very, at your own peril in a way. But there is still a problem with race, and I think you're going to hear people trying to redefine this problem and saying, well, no, police officers aren't racist. Look, it was black police officers that did this. You can't give that a pass now. I mean, there is clearly a problem with race in policing. There always has been. It's actually more in the open now than it used to be when white sheriffs were running the South in the 60s and 50s. So it's a little different now, a lot different, but it's still, a lot of those old strains are there. But we have to be very careful to not say, oh, because it was 5 black Memphis police officers, that means it wasn't race. No, race is still a huge problem here. And what you're saying, Mark, is right. I mean, they're working through a big problem both at the federal and the local level, but it's not going to happen overnight. And the fact that, so there's that old "don't bring a knife to a gunfight" thing, and that's unfortunately where the police are right now. So disarming the police who go on these traffic stops, I don't know what that's going to help, especially if criminals who have weapons know that there's an unarmed police officer.
I wanted to pivot. So go ahead.
Here's where the problem comes in these traffic stops. Okay. Officers use traffic stops to investigate people they're suspicious of. That's where the problems happen. Pulling people over in African-American neighborhoods because they suspect something. They invent traffic issues. They invent the light being the light being out, or they stop people they wouldn't normally stop. That's the problem. Is that it's not the highway patrol officer who sees you speeding down the freeway. That's not where we normally see the problem. Where we see the problem is in our neighborhoods, where officers use it as a pretext. The other issue is, as far as having guns, especially in Los Angeles, the way that we police from our cars, period, not getting out of our cars, not walking the neighborhoods, is wrong. What we need to do is more monitor. We need to look at what London does. London has some pretty bad neighborhoods, but their regular officers are not armed. They call for backup if they need backup, and specially trained officers get weapons and bring it to the situation.
But Jim, let me just say this:
has much more stringent gun control law.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was going to say. I just don't think it's a parallel.
That's part of the package. That's got to be part of the package.
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah, there has to be some.
And I think that getting out of your cars is also. I mean, I live in a neighborhood where they could easily be walking down the business district, getting to know who belongs there and who doesn't belong there, taking care of people who don't, and talking to folks. Striking up relationships. There's none of that in Los Angeles. I don't know how it is in San Francisco, and maybe a little bit better in the downtown areas in San Francisco that I've seen. But unfortunately, it's a power trip in Los Angeles. The police department operates from their vehicles and from their helicopters, and it's a total power thing. It's not a community relations. It's not a walk the beat type of situation, and that's got to change.
There is a relationship between community and law enforcement that's been lost in many, many communities, except small communities, But in the big city, where there are big city problems, it's a lot harder to do what you're talking about. And now cops fear for their own safety. In San Francisco, there's a lot of craziness. There's a huge homeless population, as there is in Los Angeles, and there's also a big dollop of crazy. Of people who are disconnected from reality and who are not only capable of violence but perpetrate violence. So
the police should not be involved in that. The police, it doesn't solve it to have a weapon and walk down the street dealing with crazy people. That is a an issue for social workers. That's an issue for where we should be. That's what the whole defund the police thing was about. Not defunding the police, but funding social work, funding people to go out on the streets and deal with these folks, putting more money in that and less money in having police officers try to deal with crazy people with their guns. That's not a solution, Mark.
So yes, I mean, of course that's true. I was just going to say to bring us back to Magnetic North on this, and then we can move on. This situation had nothing to do with the sort of thing that we're talking about. I mean, these are important things in the 3D chess of trying to manage these big cities. It's extremely important that there be a relationship between law enforcement and the community. But to go back to this case in Tennessee, there weren't guns involved. They beat this kid to death. And I mean, apparently, 5 of them have been charged with murder. And apparently, the video is so intense. I don't even think I can't watch this crap. But it's so disturbing that people are being told, don't watch it. It will, it's so abhorrent. And so, those are just clubs. Those are not, I think that goes to what you were talking about, both of you were talking about a moment ago, and that is the, again, institutional nature of authority and some of the undercurrents that go through that authority. I'm talking about racism and I'm talking about brutality. I'm talking about the power trip that you mentioned as well, Jim, but I'm also talking about racism, even though all these guys are black. I do want to pivot, if it's okay with you guys, to to something else. I really appreciate both of you weighing in for as many different ways there. This is a Rubik's Cube, man. And so I appreciate both of you kind of rotating it a few times. I did want to ask you, Michael, there's a lot going on in Washington, and I'm having trouble keeping track of those things that are legit important and those things that are just headline stealers. I wonder if you could help me.
Well, you got to be more specific, but I will help you in that they are now going through an amendment process, and the rules change that Speaker McCarthy put in place means that any one member can add an amendment to legislation. You saw one that Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Republican from Georgia, put forward yesterday, lost 413 to 14, which was as big a defeat by an amendment as I've ever seen, not getting that kind of support. But again, what they're trying to do now is feel their way around this Congress. Whenever you have a change in party and change in leadership, it takes a few weeks. We're not even a month into the McCarthy era of speakership, and who knows if it'll even last another month because of how tenuous it was. But they're working through a lot of this. They're working through what to do about the debt ceiling, and what they do is they also they test run some of these things, as we all know. So trying to figure out if we don't extend the debt ceiling, what's going to happen, who's going to be blamed. The politics of it is so important to everyone on each side. You had the White House reach out to Kevin McCarthy saying that he's going to sit down. You have the State of the Union on February 7th, where the president will be going to the Capitol. So the president and the White House want something in their back pocket when they go there to be able to say that he did from the podium and have the Democratic minority and stand up and applaud that. So there are a lot of games that go on, but also they need to get something done on this debt ceiling. And they have seated committees now, and they've seated them in a way that is controversial because of who they've excluded on the Democratic side, from Swalwell up in Northern California to people like Adam Schiff in Southern California, who's just announced he's running for Senate. So a lot of the old games are there. It's just who's in the majority now.
Yeah, I don't know that I think that much of it is very important, other than the embarrassment that we're seeing because of the new rules. We see, Marjorie Taylor Greene getting totally embarrassed by this amendment she proposed, which got 14 votes out of the 400. So I think it's that part is fun, but other than that, it's a lot of stuff that doesn't really affect us, and it's going to be that way, and we kind of have to. I think I was talking about this yesterday, Michael, and you weren't here, but I was talking about how there's a lot of noise going on in Washington right now that really only affects the Beltway, and I think that we need to focus more on the important stuff, because all the Republicans are going to try to do right now is distract, and that's what's happening for the most part in Washington, D.C. right now. I looked through the New York Times, Washington Post this morning, my normal reads. I didn't see a lot that I needed to pay much attention to, because it was,
and there's no indication either. There's no indication either that they're going to pivot to significant legislation right now. Hunter Biden is in their sights, and that, of course, is the biggest distraction, and it will be in an enduring way. I mean, they're going to Benghazi the hell out of the president's son, and that's their plan. And in terms of taking that to the voters in 2024, forgetting it in the presidential, but in the Senate elections and the House elections, it's going to be tougher to hold on and convince people, especially in these Biden districts that Republicans won. I think there are 19 of them, and the White House has said they're pushing very, very hard in those districts to try and put those members on their heels into what they're supporting that comes out of the distracted Congress, so that maybe they'll be able to win the House back. So it matters to a degree who is involved.
The GOP is not in touch anymore. It's so out of touch with what really is going on in America, and even on these cultural issues. People like their librarians.
But they won the presidency and they won the House. So to that degree, they don't think they're out of touch, right? And even though they won it through gerrymandering and they won it through a fluke of candidacy in 2016, and they don't even believe, many of them, that they lost it in 2020, it isn't registering. What you're saying is so true, but it isn't registering. So they think things are fine.
At their own peril, though, Michael.
At their own peril, for sure. But it hasn't been as perilous as it needs to be yet.
Yeah. Well, the next election is just around the corner.
Right.
And it's interesting that in this conversation, there's a lot going on, but this is sort of the point, that the document scandal and the document questions, that became sort of bumped to the side in our conversation. I know that they're going to try to make hay of it, but as more and more documents keep showing up in various, in everybody's broom closet, you end up with that being a less incendiary, and perhaps
it becomes a problem of the National Archive. And, apparently they can't find any classified documents at the National Archives.
But again, it's just the bottom line is intent. And
right.
And while we, unfortunately, it appears we don't want to diminish what Trump did, because it's different than what Pence did and what Biden did. And in some ways, what Pence did helps Biden, because it shows, and it doesn't help. I don't think it helps Trump that much legally, because and I used this before on this program. The intent is the major problem, and and was summed up by an analogy that I read in an opinion piece in the New York Times. Is that it's like if you shoplift, if you go out of the shopping center, the store, the grocery store, and you have an item in your shopping cart that you didn't realize was there, and the security guard, and the thing goes off and the security guard pulls you out, and you say, "Oh, I apologize, let me go back and pay for that." They're not going to mess with you. But if you run away, you run outside and you say, "Wait, that's mine. That belongs to me," and try to get away in your car and run away like Trump did, that's a problem. And I still think that he has a problem, although it's not his biggest problem on the legal front.
Yeah, it's interesting in that case of that parallel. I'm thinking it's not even like taking something that was on sale at the store. It's like taking something that was like a display aisle thing, and you're walking out of that. You're not. This isn't an option for you to take it home and keep it. Okay, right. I don't care whether you paid for it or not.
No, it's like you took caviar.
Yeah, your point is a good one. In our last second, Michael Shure. Tell me, the Eagles, they are tough. Albert was saying that he feels as though the Eagles and Niners match up really well. The difference is, of course, the quarterback. The Eagles quarterback is just really a scary, talented guy.
Yeah, right. I mean, he's a great quarterback. They've done well when he isn't in the lineup too, which shows you how good his supporting staff is, right? I think that the offensive line of the Eagles is the difference maker in this game, because I don't think the 49ers offensive line is good, but I think their defense and their linebackers are going to shut down a running game and force Hurts to run himself or throw the ball a lot. And then we'll see what the 49ers defensive backfield does. It's going to be I'd rather have Jalen Hurts than Brock Purdy in this particular game. Nothing against Purdy and nothing career-wise and nothing in a big picture. But today or tomorrow, Sunday, going into that game and playing it, you want the guy who has more experience. And Brock Purdy is still a rookie quarterback who fell into this by accident and has done really, really well. There's nobody on the 49ers right now who doesn't want any other quarterback other than Brock Purdy. But it's still, he's a rookie quarterback. Eventually, I imagine, because I've never seen it work, something's got to give. But I hope it's not Sunday, and I hope they crush the Eagles.
Well,
yeah, the 49ers have to.
Yeah.
I think that the 49ers have to be in every other department clearly better. And we'll see if that happens. I mean, I'm rooting for them. I hope they do well. But I've been raising this flag for a while, wondering when the fact that Purdy is not an A-plus quarterback will finally show up.
Right.
And I worry it's this time.
It's also it's a really tough building to play in, right? I mean, playing in Philadelphia for any quarterback, whether you're a veteran or not. So in essence, and maybe the fact that he's so green, it just won't affect him. That he'll just be, I've got other things to worry about right now. But it's a tough.
Well, I'll tell you, the Cowboys tried to rock him a couple of times. You could see even with a late hit once. You could tell the charge that coaches are giving their defensive line particularly and their defenses generally is make Purdy remind him that this is the big time. And that we're a big time team, and they are going to try to rough him up a little bit.
And the Niners O-line is not the best part of their game. It's good, but their left tackle's great, but it's
so the way you handle that is you establish a running game so that those linemen can't be rushing the pass all the time, in such a way that Purdy's exposed to greater danger. But anyway,
also forfeit.
Yeah. Okay. Michael, where are you watching the game?
I will be. It's unclear where I'll be watching. I'll be watching it either at a hockey rink or in the comfort of the Shure living room.
All right. Well, go Niners. Boys, I'm here in D.C. I'm going to be watching. I don't know where I'll be watching. I'm here with my dad. If it's possible within the configuration of his new place, I might try to watch it there in his room.
Great.
But Avila, Shure, you're great. We appreciate it. Thank you. And we look forward to you rejoining next Friday. Thanks a lot, guys. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.